A simple act of kindness at a small diner changed a boy's life forever, and caught the attention of the billionaire father who would change hers. It was a busy Saturday morning, the kind of morning when the small diner in the heart of the town buzzed with life. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mixed with the warm scent of sizzling pancakes and toasted bread. The chatter of regular customers, the clinking of cutlery, and the occasional laughter made the diner feel lively and comforting. Behind the counter, Emily moved with practiced ease. She was used to double shifts, to the rush of orders, and the endless smiles she had to give, even when her feet ached or her stomach grumbled. But Emily didn't mind. She loved her job because it was more than serving food. It was about connecting with people, even in the smallest ways. That morning, Emily noticed a man walking in who seemed different from the usual crowd. He wasn't flashy, didn't wear expensive clothes, and didn't carry himself like someone important. He was quiet, almost shy, yet there was a presence about him that made heads turn slightly, even though nobody dared to stare. With him was a little boy in a wheelchair, a young boy of about 7 years old named Ethan. There was something in Ethan's eyes that immediately tugged at Emily's heart. They were deep, serious eyes, full of sadness, curiosity, and a longing that was too big for his small frame. His hands gripped the wheels of his chair nervously, and he seemed tense, almost afraid to interact with anyone. Emily felt a mix of compassion and curiosity. She had seen many children over the years, some shy, some loud, but Ethan's silence was different. It wasn't just shyness. It was a quiet sadness, a weight he carried like he had been carrying it for years. The boy's father, Daniel Parker, tried to help him eat, but it was clear it wasn't working. Ethan pushed the food around his plate with his fork, not touching anything. Daniel looked frustrated, but more sad than angry. There was a helplessness in his eyes that Emily recognized. Immediately, the kind of helplessness that comes from loving someone deeply but not knowing how to help them. Emily had learned over the years that sometimes children just needed patience, not force, not advice. So, she approached the table carefully. Kneeling slightly so she wasn't towering over Ethan, she smiled gently, trying to make herself as non-threatening as possible. "Hi there," she said softly. "I'm Emily. Would you like me to tell you a little story while you eat?" Ethan's eyes flicked to her but didn't move. He said nothing. Emily didn't panic. She knew some children took time. She pulled a chair close and began speaking quietly, telling him about pancakes that could fly, milk that could sparkle, and forks that were magic wands. She spoke slowly, making the words light and playful. Hoping to make him curious enough to respond, something in Ethan stirred. At first, it was a small twitch in the corner of his mouth. Then, a tiny giggle escaped him, barely audible, but enough to make Emily's heart lift. She smiled and continued. She didn't rush him, didn't push him to eat. She just made the idea of eating fun, turning the act into a game, a small adventure. "Do you want to try the flying pancake trick?" she asked, holding a small piece near him. Ethan hesitated, then slowly opened his mouth. Emily's eyes widened in gentle surprise, not because she was shocked he would eat, but because she understood how significant this moment was. It wasn't just about food, it was about trust. A child who had been closed off, who had felt isolated, was letting someone in, letting someone take care of him, even in this small, ordinary way. Across the table, Daniel Parker watched silently. He tried to pretend he was checking something on his phone, but his hands trembled slightly. His eyes didn't leave his son. Emily had no idea that she was doing something so monumental. She didn't know that Daniel's wife had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Ethan fragile and Daniel heartbroken. She didn't know that he had tried everything: therapists, tutors, special programs, but nothing had worked to coax his son out of his shell. Nothing had managed to make him eat without stress. And now in this small diner, watching Emily kneel beside his son and speak to him with warmth and patience, Daniel felt a surge of emotion that he had tried to bury for years. Emily laughed softly, making silly sounds as she moved the pancake closer, pretending it was a plane zooming into Ethan's mouth. "Here comes the super flying pancake," she said, and Ethan's eyes followed, curious now, not afraid. Slowly, carefully, he opened his mouth wider. Emily fed him the tiny piece. His cheeks flushed slightly, and then another small giggle escaped. Emily's heart swelled. She had no idea who this little boy was in the larger world, but she knew that in this moment, she had made a difference. Daniel felt tears prickling at his eyes, hot and sudden. He had been trying to hold back for so long, trying to maintain control, to be strong for his son and for himself. But now, seeing his son smile, seeing him respond to someone with joy for the first time in months, all the pain, the loss, the guilt came rushing back. He turned slightly, hoping Emily wouldn't notice, but it was too late. She glanced up briefly, catching his eye, and gave him a warm, understanding smile. The diner around them carried on as usual. The smell of coffee, the sizzling pans, the hum of conversation, all ordinary sounds, but for Daniel, it felt like the world had shifted slightly. Time had slowed. Nothing else mattered except this small act of kindness, this woman who had bridged a gap that he hadn't thought possible. He watched as Ethan laughed again, this time a little louder, and even reached for the fork himself. Emily guided his hand gently, encouraging him, praising him for trying. Every tiny success made Daniel's heart swell. Emily had no idea that she was changing a life. It's not just Ethan's, but his father's as well. She wasn't thinking about recognition or reward or status. She was simply being herself, kind, patient, caring, and fully present. She didn't need to know that Daniel Parker was a billionaire or that he was watching her every move, captivated by her spirit. To her, this was just a Saturday morning. It's just a boy who needed a little help and attention. Ethan finished the small plate of pancakes with a shy but proud smile. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible, but it was enough to stop Daniel's heart. That single word carried years of struggle, pain, and now hope. Emily wiped his face gently, still smiling. "You did amazing, champ," she said. Daniel remained seated, overwhelmed. Realizing that some moments could not be measured in money or power, this simple act, feeding his son, making him smile, coaxing him to laugh again, was more valuable than anything he had ever achieved. And all of it had happened because of a kind-hearted waitress who had no idea. She had become the most important person in his son's life that day. The morning ended with a sense of calm and warmth. Emily returned to the counter, moving among her other customers. But she kept glancing back at Ethan and Daniel, smiling quietly. Ethan waved at her shyly, and she waved back, feeling a small, unspoken connection. Daniel knew he had witnessed something extraordinary, something rare, a moment of genuine human connection that had the power to change everything by the time they left the diner. Daniel Parker was no longer just a father who had lost his wife and struggled with his son's isolation. He was a father who had witnessed hope, who had seen the possibility of joy return to his child's life. And Emily? She simply went on with her work, unaware that she had begun a story that would intertwine their lives forever. Daniel Parker sat quietly in his car outside the diner after leaving that morning. The streets were busy, filled with the usual Saturday rush, but his mind was far away. He couldn't stop replaying what he had seen, the small miracle of Emily feeding his son. Every detail was vivid, the gentle way she spoke, the funny little stories she told, the way Ethan's eyes lit up with curiosity and joy. For years, Daniel had struggled to reach his son, to connect with him after the loss of his wife, and in one ordinary morning, a complete stranger had done what he himself couldn't. The thought both overwhelmed and humbled him. For Ethan, the experience had been magical. He remembered Emily kneeling beside him, telling him about pancakes that could fly and forks that were magic wands. He had never felt so safe, so encouraged, so understood. The laughter that had escaped him that morning felt foreign yet comforting. For months, he had avoided meals, avoided interaction, and even avoided smiling, as if happiness was a distant concept he wasn't allowed to touch. But Emily had made him feel like a hero, a brave boy who could do anything, even eat his breakfast with a smile. Daniel had spent 2 years in a whirlwind of work and grief, trying to hold his empire together while managing the empty spaces left by his wife's death. But no amount of money or resources had solved the one thing that mattered most: Ethan's happiness. Therapists, tutors, Even special programs for children with developmental challenges had all failed to break through the invisible walls his son had built. And yet, Emily, with no training or agenda, had managed it in minutes. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. There was something about her warmth, her patience, her genuine care that had pierced through Ethan's defenses in a way he had never imagined possible. Back in the diner, Emily continued her work, serving coffee, clearing plates, and managing the breakfast rush. But even she couldn't shake the memory of Ethan's small smile. The way his hands had nervously reached out for the pancake she offered, the soft thank you that had slipped from his lips. She had fed many children before, and she had comforted plenty of scared little ones. But something about Ethan's trust had touched her deeply. She realized that small acts of kindness could ripple far beyond what anyone could imagine. Daniel returned to the diner multiple times over the next few days, mostly trying to observe quietly without making Emily uncomfortable. Each time, Ethan seemed more relaxed, more willing to engage. He laughed easily when Emily told her playful stories and seemed eager to participate in the small games she created around meals. She had an instinct for understanding children's emotions, knowing when to encourage and when to step back. Ethan's world, which had been quiet and lonely, began to feel lighter. Emily didn't know who Daniel was, and she didn't care. She didn't treat Ethan differently because of wealth or status. To her, he was simply a child who deserved patience, kindness, and attention. She made meals fun, turning small bites of food into adventures and stories. "Watch out. Here comes the pancake rocket," she would say, holding a tiny piece near Ethan's mouth. He would giggle, sometimes opening his mouth before she even asked. She celebrated every small success, praising him gently, never scolding, never rushing. Daniel watched from a distance, feeling a mix of admiration and awe. He had met many people in his life, many kind-hearted and talented individuals, but Emily's natural empathy was rare. She had no reason to spend so much time and energy on his son, yet she did it effortlessly. Her sincerity was apparent in every smile, every word, every little gesture. He realized that some gifts, the ones that matter most, couldn't be bought or scheduled. They came from people like Emily, who genuinely cared without expecting anything in return. At home, Daniel found himself replaying those moments over and over. He told his assistant he might not come into the office that afternoon, not because of work, but because he couldn't stop thinking about Emily and Ethan. He remembered how small gestures had transformed his son's demeanor, how laughter had returned to Ethan's face, and how for a few brief moments his son had felt truly seen and loved. Daniel realized that wealth and influence couldn't replace the simple human connections his son so desperately needed. Meanwhile, Emily continued to engage Ethan with creativity. She brought little drawings she had made herself and asked him to add colors, turning breakfast into an art project. She would tell him funny stories about invisible animals that only children could see, and Ethan would giggle shyly at first, then more confidently. He started to look forward to their mornings together, and slowly the world began to open up for him. One day, Daniel watched as Emily encouraged Ethan to feed himself a small piece of pancake. He struggled at first, dropping pieces and laughing nervously. But she cheered him on, clapping gently and praising his effort. "You're doing amazing," she said. "I knew you could do it." Ethan's confidence grew with each bite, and Daniel felt a surge of gratitude so strong it brought tears to his eyes. In that moment, he realized that the bond forming between Emily and Ethan wasn't just about food or games, it was about trust, love, and emotional healing. Daniel had never thought of himself as an emotional man in public. He was a billionaire, a leader in his field, accustomed to control and precision. But Emily's kindness had reminded him that the heart sometimes matters more than anything else. He realized he had been so focused on his empire, on success and achievement, that he had neglected the one thing he couldn't buy, his son's happiness. Watching Emily interact with Ethan made him feel hope, something he hadn't felt in years. Even the other staff at the diner noticed a change. Ethan, who had once been withdrawn and silent, now smiled, laughed, and even talked to a few other customers. He had started to reach out for small interactions, showing tiny sparks of curiosity and engagement. Emily had become a bridge between his small world of isolation and the possibility of joy, and Daniel silently thanked her for giving his son a glimpse of normal childhood happiness again by the end of the week. A routine had formed. Daniel and Ethan came to the diner daily, and Emily continued to guide, encourage, and care for Ethan in small, meaningful ways. She made each morning an adventure, turning ordinary food into magical moments. And for Daniel, who had once felt powerless, this was a revelation. The realization that even the simplest acts of human kindness could heal wounds that no amount of money or planning could fix. At home that evening, Daniel watched Ethan play quietly in his room, a soft smile on his face. It was a peaceful smile, one that hadn't been there for a long time. Daniel realized that Emily's presence had changed more than his son. It had changed him, too. He had been reminded of the power of compassion, of patience, and of connection. And he knew deep down that their lives had shifted in a way that would never be the same again. Emily, unaware of the depth of her impact, continued to live her life simply, going from table to table, serving customers with a smile. Yet, through her small acts of kindness, she had begun a journey that would intertwine her life with Daniel and Ethan's forever. She had reminded them that hope could come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes one person's heart could change the world for another completely by the time Saturday came again. Daniel and Ethan returned to the diner. The boy ran to Emily, smiling broadly, eager for their morning adventure. Daniel followed behind, a quiet pride and gratitude in his eyes. He knew that the days ahead would be better, brighter, and filled with laughter, all because a simple act of kindness. It sparked a change that neither time nor money could ever replace. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Ethan and Emily grew stronger. Each morning, Daniel and Ethan arrived at the diner, and Emily was ready with her warm smile, playful stories, and endless patience. Ethan, who had once avoided meals and human interaction, now ran toward Emily the moment he entered, his wheelchair rolling with eager anticipation. He would wave excitedly, calling out Emily, and she would respond with a cheerful, "Good morning, champ. Are you ready for another pancake adventure?" The little rituals they shared were becoming the highlight of Ethan's week, and slowly, Daniel began to see changes in his son that no money or therapy could have produced. Emily's way with Ethan was extraordinary because it was natural. She didn't follow a script, she didn't lecture, and she didn't treat him as a special case. She simply saw a child who needed kindness, patience, and attention, and she gave it without hesitation. Some mornings, she would sit at his level and make silly faces while he took bites. Other times, she would turn pancakes into spaceships, zooming across the plate. Ethan would giggle, sometimes nervously, sometimes freely, but always with joy that had been absent for far too long. Daniel, meanwhile, became more than a distant observer. He started noticing not only Ethan's small victories, but also Emily's dedication, her care, and her natural empathy. She had a way of making a child feel safe and valued, of turning ordinary moments into meaningful connections. Daniel had tried everything: expensive tutors, specialists, advanced therapies, but none had succeeded like Emily had. He found himself quietly marveling at her abilities. The ease with which she won Ethan's trust, and the subtle ways she encouraged him without pressure at home. Daniel observed changes in Ethan that were remarkable. The boy who had once refused meals was now eating properly, smiling, and even asking questions. His confidence grew with each visit to the diner, and Daniel began to understand that this transformation wasn't just about food. It was about love, patience, and genuine human connection. Ethan had found someone who believed in him, someone whose kindness made him feel safe and capable. And Daniel knew that person wasn't just anyone. She was extraordinary. One afternoon, as Emily fed Ethan a small piece of pancake, Daniel noticed something that made his heart ache with gratitude. Ethan had taken Emily's hand and held it gently, a gesture that was both shy and meaningful. It was as if he wanted to say thank you without words. Emily smiled at him warmly, squeezing his hand in return. "You're doing amazing, Ethan," she said softly. "I'm so proud of you." The simplicity of the moment, the genuine care between them, struck Daniel profoundly. He realized that some acts of kindness were far more powerful than wealth, influence, or control. Emily, unaware of Daniel's deep admiration, continued her work as if it were just another day. She brought drawings for Ethan to color, turned meals into storytelling adventures, and patiently guided him through small challenges. Sometimes, she would encourage him to try feeding himself, clapping gently when he succeeded and offering reassurance when he struggled. Each victory, no matter how small, was celebrated. Ethan's laughter became more frequent, his confidence grew, and his trust in Emily deepened. As the weeks passed, Daniel's own perspective began to shift. He had been consumed with building his empire, managing his company, and handling the pressures of his public life. But watching Emily interact with Ethan reminded him of what truly mattered: love, patience, and the ability to connect with others on a human level. He realized that he had been chasing achievements and success, neglecting the most important person in his life, his son. Emily's presence illuminated what he had been missing: the simple joy of connection, the healing power of empathy, and the unspoken bond between a caring adult and a child. One particular morning, Emily noticed Ethan hesitating to take a bite. He looked uncertain, as if he feared failure. She leaned closer and whispered, "It's okay, Ethan. You can do it at your own pace. I'll be right here with you." Her words were gentle, encouraging, and patient. Slowly, Ethan lifted the fork to his mouth, and this time he did it entirely on his own. A triumphant smile spread across his face, and Emily clapped softly, praising him. Daniel, who had been watching quietly, felt tears prick at his eyes. He realized that these small moments of courage and trust were far more important than any business deal he had ever closed. Emily also had a way of engaging Ethan's imagination. She would make ordinary things exciting. A cup of juice became a magic potion, a slice of toast turned into a rocket ship, and even the simple act of stirring a pancake batter was a heroic adventure. Ethan responded with enthusiasm, his laughter filling the diner and drawing smiles from other customers. Daniel noticed how Emily's creativity and warmth made Ethan feel empowered, capable, and loved. She had a rare gift, the ability to reach a child's heart in ways that words alone could not. Even the diner staff began to notice the transformation. Ethan, who had once been quiet and withdrawn, greeted them politely, smiled easily, and occasionally joined in small conversations. The boy who had feared interaction was becoming more confident, and Emily's influence was evident. Daniel silently acknowledged that Emily was the reason for this change. No therapist, no program, no tutor could have achieved what she had done with patience, creativity, and care. At home, Daniel observed the ripple effects of Emily's impact. Ethan's mood improved, his sleep was better, and he was more willing to try new things. Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope and gratitude. He realized that Emily had not only helped his son, but it also reminded him of the importance of compassion, patience, and emotional connection. Watching her work with Ethan, he felt a deep respect for her, recognition that her kindness was extraordinary. As the weeks continued, a quiet bond formed between Daniel and Emily as well. He didn't approach her with the knowledge of his wealth or status. Instead, he simply observed her interactions with his son, appreciating her sincerity, patience, and genuine care. He wanted to understand the person who had so effortlessly reached his child's heart. Emily, focused entirely on Ethan, remained unaware of Daniel's admiration, treating him as any concerned father. Polite but not overly involved. One day, Ethan, full of confidence and joy, reached for a fork without hesitation and fed himself a pancake completely on his own. Emily smiled brightly, clapping softly and praising him for his effort. "Look at you. You're amazing, Ethan," she said. The boy's eyes sparkled, and he laughed freely, a sound that had been missing for months. Daniel, watching from across the table, felt a mixture of relief, joy, and awe. He realized that Emily's presence had brought life back into his home, laughter back into his son's heart, and hope back into his own. By the end of that week, Daniel knew that he had witnessed something extraordinary. Emily had done more than serve food. She had transformed his son's life with patience, kindness, and genuine human connection. Ethan's confidence, joy, and trust had blossomed. And Daniel understood that these small acts of love were far more valuable than anything money could buy. Emily, unaware of the profound impact she had made, continued her work with the same warmth and dedication. She had no idea that her presence had changed not only Ethan's life, but also Daniel's perspective on parenthood, kindness, and the power of genuine human connection. She simply did what she knew was right, treating a child with patience, respect, and love. And so the ordinary mornings at the small diner became extraordinary moments of transformation. Through Emily's simple acts of kindness, Ethan began to rediscover joy, confidence, and the courage to trust again. Daniel, silently observing, felt a gratitude that went beyond words. He knew that their lives had shifted in a profound way. All because of one woman's heart, one child's willingness to believe again, the quiet, powerful magic of human connection. The weeks had passed quietly. With the small diner becoming a place of magic for Ethan, he had begun to laugh freely, speak more openly, and even try things he had avoided before. Daniel Parker watched with growing admiration, silently marveling at the transformation that Emily had brought about in his son. Yet there was still something unresolved in Daniel's mind. He wanted Emily to understand the true depth of what she had accomplished, the significance of her impact on their lives. He had watched her, seen her kindness and patience, and he realized that she was extraordinary in ways that went far beyond ordinary human decency. One quiet afternoon, after the lunch rush had ended and the diner had returned to its usual calm, Daniel finally gathered the courage to speak to Emily. Ethan was happily coloring a drawing Emily had given him, humming to himself, and Emily was wiping down the table with a gentle smile. Daniel approached, trying to keep his voice calm, almost casual, but internally he was nervous. He knew that this conversation could change everything. For both Emily and his family. Emily, Daniel began, his voice steady but gentle. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Emily looked up, smiling warmly. "Of course," she said. She didn't know what was coming, but she could see the seriousness in his eyes and nodded. Guiding Ethan gently to his seat while she stood to face Daniel, Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I want to tell you something important, something about who I am." Emily tilted her head, curiosity evident in her expression. "I'm just a waitress," she said modestly, shrugging. "You don't need to tell me anything special." Daniel shook his head with a faint smile. "You don't understand," he said. "I'm not just a father bringing his son here. My name is Daniel Parker. I run Parker Technologies, you may have heard of it. I'm a billionaire." Emily blinked, then laughed nervously. "You're joking," she said, shaking her head. "This has to be a joke." But Daniel handed her a card, formal yet elegant, with his name and company information. Emily's laughter faded, replaced by a stunned silence. She looked at the card, then back at Daniel, then at Ethan. She couldn't believe it. The quiet, unassuming man she had seen every morning, who cared so deeply for his son, was someone she had read about in magazines and newspapers, a billionaire, a man of immense wealth and influence. Daniel watched her carefully, aware of her surprise, but not wanting to overwhelm her. "I didn't tell you before because I wanted you to see Ethan as a child, not as the son of a wealthy man," he explained softly. "I wanted to see the real you, and now I see it. I see your heart, your patience, your kindness. The way you reached my son in ways that no one else has been able to." Emily's voice was soft, almost whispering. I don't know what to say. I'm just doing my job. I care about Ethan, yes, but I didn't do this for recognition or money." Daniel nodded, touched by her sincerity. "I know," he said, "and that's why this is so remarkable. You helped my son in ways that no therapy, no tutor, no program could. You brought laughter back into his life. You helped him trust again, and you reminded me what love and patience truly mean." For a long moment, Emily was quiet, absorbing his words. She had never imagined that her ordinary acts of kindness could have such a profound effect. She had only wanted to help a child, to make mornings easier, to turn meals into moments of joy. And now, Daniel was telling her that she had changed not only Ethan's life, but his own as well. Then Daniel said something that made Emily's heart race. "I want to offer you something," he began carefully. "I want you to work with Ethan to be his companion, his guide, and his support. I want you to help him continue to grow, to explore, to laugh, to feel safe. And I want you to do it not just here in the diner, but at home, wherever life takes us. It's more than a job. It's an opportunity to make a real difference in his life and in ours." Emily's eyes widened. She had never expected this, a job. Working closely with Ethan, traveling with them, being part of their family circle, it was overwhelming. Her mind raced. She had her life at the diner, her small apartment, her simple routines. She loved her life. But looking at Ethan, seeing the way his eyes followed Daniel's every word, the way he looked at her with hope and trust, she knew she couldn't refuse. Daniel saw the hesitation, the mix of fear and excitement in her eyes, and he spoke softly. "I understand if this is a lot to take in," he said. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer. I wanted you to know that I see you. I see what you've done, and I want you to be part of our lives in a bigger way." Emily looked at Ethan, who had stopped coloring and was watching her closely. He didn't say anything, but his expression said everything. She saw the trust, the hope, the desire for her to stay in his life. And in that moment, Emily realized that her connection with Ethan had become something far greater than she could have imagined. It wasn't just about breakfast or pancakes anymore. It was about helping a child find joy, confidence, and love in a world that had been difficult for him. Taking a deep breath, Emily smiled. I think I would like to try," she said softly. Daniel smiled warmly, relief and gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "You have no idea what this means to us." Over the next few days, the details of the new arrangement began to take shape. Emily would continue to support Ethan at the diner, but also at home, helping him navigate everyday challenges, engaging him in activities, and providing the kind of consistent care and companionship that had already begun to transform his life. She would accompany them on outings, provide creative activities, help Daniel ensure that Ethan's emotional and developmental needs were fully met. Emily felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never imagined herself in such a role. It was a leap into a new world, a world of responsibility, opportunity, and most importantly, impact. She realized that her simple acts of kindness had led her to a place where she could truly change lives in a profound way. And for Ethan, the future suddenly seemed brighter, filled with hope, laughter, and endless possibilities. Daniel, for his part, felt a sense of peace and gratitude he hadn't known in years. Emily had not only helped his son, but she had also reminded him of what truly mattered in life. He realized that wealth, power, and influence were meaningless without the ability to love, connect, and care deeply for those we cherish. Emily had given them both a gift that could never be measured in dollars, the gift of hope, trust, and the possibility of a brighter future. The days that followed were filled with adjustments, learning, and laughter. Emily quickly adapted to her new role, and Ethan thrived under her care. Daniel watched quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes participating, but always aware of the extraordinary impact Emily was having on their lives. And as he watched his son grow more confident, more joyful, and more willing to embrace life, he knew that offering Emily this opportunity had been one of the best decisions he had ever made. By the time Part 4 concluded, the family dynamic had shifted completely. Ethan had someone he trusted implicitly, someone who made life exciting, safe, and full of love. Daniel had regained a sense of hope and purpose, seeing his son flourish in ways he had never thought possible. And Emily, who had simply been herself, kind, patient, and caring, had stepped into a role that would define the next chapter of all their lives. The ordinary mornings at the diner had turned into extraordinary beginnings, setting the stage for a future filled with joy, growth, and unconditional love. Life for Ethan, Daniel, and Emily changed in ways none of them could have imagined. What had begun as ordinary mornings at a small-town diner had grown into something far bigger, a connection that reshaped their lives. Emily had stepped into a role that went beyond a job. She became a companion, a mentor, and a source of unconditional support for Ethan. And through her presence, the small moments of joy she brought each day turned into lasting confidence, laughter, and trust that extended far beyond the diner walls. Ethan's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. He woke up each morning with excitement, anticipating the adventures and activities Emily had planned. Simple tasks, which had once felt daunting or impossible, now became fun challenges. Breakfasts were full of laughter and stories. Lunches were creative experiences, and even ordinary chores became games. Emily had taught him that life could be joyful, that mistakes were part of learning, and that patience and kindness were tools stronger than fear. Each small success, feeding himself, completing a puzzle, trying a new activity built his confidence and reshaped the way he saw the world. Daniel watched these changes with a mixture of awe and gratitude. He had spent years buried in work, trying to fill the void left by his wife's passing. He had poured energy into his empire, thinking that control and wealth could somehow replace the love and care that his son needed. But nothing had worked until Emily came into their lives. She had given Ethan something priceless: trust, happiness, and the courage to engage with the world again. And in doing so, she had reminded Daniel of what truly mattered: his son's laughter, his smiles, his growing independence. These were treasures far greater than any business achievement or financial gain. The bond between Emily and Ethan grew stronger with each passing day. She celebrated his small victories, encouraged his curiosity, and offered guidance whenever he needed it. Sometimes they would sit together drawing and coloring, creating imaginary worlds that allowed Ethan to express his thoughts and feelings. Other times, they would explore the garden, observing butterflies, planting flowers, and talking about the colors of the sky. Emily understood that every little moment was an opportunity for Ethan to feel safe, loved, and capable. Daniel often observed these moments quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes joining in. He marveled at Emily's patience, her creativity, and her ability to make even the smallest experiences meaningful. He saw the joy in Ethan's eyes, the confidence in his posture, and the freedom in his laughter. And he understood, more deeply than ever, that Emily's influence had changed not only his son's life, but also his own. For years, he had been searching for solutions, trying to find ways to help Ethan heal. Now he realized that the most powerful force in their lives was Emily's heart, her empathy, and her unwavering kindness. One sunny morning, Daniel watched from the terrace as Emily and Ethan watered the garden together. Ethan laughed as water droplets splashed onto the flowers and occasionally onto Emily herself. Emily smiled warmly, gently guiding his hands, encouraging him to notice the shapes and colors of the plants. "See how strong the sun makes them grow?" she said. "Just like you every day, you grow stronger." Ethan giggled, repeating the words, and Daniel felt a warmth spread through him. This scene, simple, quiet, yet so full of life, was a gift he could never put into words. Emily had become more than a caretaker. She was a friend, a guide, and a source of stability for Ethan. She helped him navigate the challenges of daily life, encouraged him to try new things, and celebrated his achievements, no matter how small. Her presence gave him confidence, joy, and a sense of belonging. For Daniel, seeing his son thrive in this way was a relief and a revelation. He realized that love, patience, and human connection were far more valuable than any material possession. At home, Ethan's newfound confidence extended to other areas of his life. He engaged more with family and friends, participated in school activities, and even began to explore hobbies he had previously avoided. His laughter became more frequent, his curiosity more apparent, and his sense of security grew stronger each day. Daniel could see the impact Emily had on every aspect of his son's development, and he was deeply grateful for her unwavering dedication. Emily, meanwhile, had embraced her new role fully. She remained humble, never letting wealth or status change who she was. She continued to approach each day with the same warmth, creativity, and patience that had first captured Daniel's attention. She understood that her role was not about recognition or reward, but about making a meaningful difference in Ethan's life. Every smile, every laugh, every small accomplishment became a reminder of why she had chosen to dedicate herself to him. As the months passed, the relationship between Emily, Ethan, and Daniel grew into a true family bond. They shared meals together, celebrated milestones, and supported each other through challenges. Emily's presence brought stability, joy, and love into a home that had once been marked by grief and uncertainty. Daniel, once consumed by work and sorrow, found peace and fulfillment in witnessing the happiness she had helped restore. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with warm hues, Daniel watched Emily and Ethan sitting on the porch laughing as they shared a story. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and contentment. He realized that the gift Emily had given his son was immeasurable, and that her impact would last a lifetime. She had brought laughter, hope, and love back into their home, transforming ordinary moments into extraordinary memories. Ethan, now full of confidence and curiosity, turned to Emily with a bright smile. "You're my favorite person," he said softly, his words filled with sincerity and warmth. Emily's eyes glistened as she hugged him gently. "And you're mine, Ethan," she replied. In that embrace, Daniel saw the culmination of months of patience, care, and love, a bond that had reshaped their lives and created a foundation for the future. Daniel reflected on how far they had come. He had watched his son grow from a shy, withdrawn child into a confident, joyful boy. He had seen the power of kindness, patience, and genuine care. And he had realized that some of life's most valuable lessons came from ordinary people with extraordinary hearts. Emily had taught them both that hope, laughter, and love could heal even the deepest wounds. As time went on, their life together continued to flourish. Emily remained an integral part of their daily routines, guiding Ethan, sharing in his joys and challenges, building memories that would last a lifetime. Daniel found new meaning in his role as a father, inspired by Emily's example and the happiness he witnessed in his son. And Ethan, supported by Emily's unwavering care, continued to grow, thrive, and explore the world with confidence and joy. The small diner where it all began became a symbol of their journey, a place where a simple act of kindness had sparked a chain of events that transformed lives. Emily, who had entered their world as a humble waitress, had become the heart of their family, demonstrating the profound impact that one person's compassion and dedication could have. In the end, life was no longer defined by loss or struggle. It was defined by laughter, love, and the extraordinary bond between a child, his father, and the woman who had helped him rediscover the joy of living. Emily had brought light into a world that had been shadowed by grief, and in doing so, she had changed their lives forever. Daniel, watching his son and Emily together, understood that money, power, and influence could never have achieved what Emily's heart had accomplished. She had given them something priceless: hope, trust, and the joy of being truly seen and loved. Their lives had been transformed, not by wealth, but by kindness, patience, and the extraordinary power of human connection. And so, the story that began with a simple morning at a small diner reached its beautiful conclusion. Emily, Ethan, and Daniel had formed a bond that was unbreakable, a family forged through care, love, and unwavering support. Every smile, every laugh, every shared moment was a testament to the incredible difference one person can make in the lives of others. Through Emily's heart and dedication, the ordinary became extraordinary. The lives of a father and his son were forever changed.